So we are live recording. Welcome to another episode of the Robin Hallsten Experience. Today I have Eugene Trufkin on the other end of this call. Hello, Eugene. Eugene,
Hey,
and how are you today?
I'm doing well, man. Thanks for having me on your show.
Yeah, cool.
Finally get in touch with you. So
Yeah, we actually got in contact by Jonathan Paul Duncan, who's been on the podcast two times actually, and he thought that we'd be vibing together. So that's where we're at right now because we this is the first time we actually connect. So fun way to connect. So Eugene, how would you describe yourself? What do you do in your life?
well, right now I'm living in California, and I basically specialize in like personal training, and my focus is on fat loss in particular. So people that are interested in basically like body composition, fat loss, nutrition, all that, and anything that goes hand in hand with fat loss. So yeah.
Cool. Yeah, because I've been watching your website, doing a quick research, and I guess like in California, it's kind of like what gets people into development is to get the abs and stuff like that. But what I also I think underlines what I assumed when seeing that you're like a also a Czech practitioner as well. Is that kind of how you get people into holistic health? Is to start with the body and then teach others to I was how we say it, like self actualize.
I would have to say, honestly, I've been doing it for like 12 years already, 12 or so years already. And I have to say, like from day one, I always approached it like very holistically
Mm,
because I always kind of perceived like fat gain as a symptom of poor lifestyle and nutrition choices. So
mm,
I always knew the challenge was kind of changing those two variables versus like just focusing on working out more.
mm,
Because uh, working out more isn't going to do too much at the end of the day. And in fact, if like a person is already worn out or doesn't have the energy to do that, it kind of just, if anything, makes things worse. So yeah, so I always kind of saw it as an approach that you had to kind of like take holistically in order to have like even to lose the 20 or 30 pounds, but more importantly, to have that lasting change. So instead of like losing 30 pounds and then you see the person 2 years later and they're still overweight, so
mm.
there's only kind of like, I guess, short term progress with just the working out approach. So
Yeah. So what do you see as a personal trainer that is the key for keeping and maintaining that fat loss or keeping yourself fit? What is the number one thing that you see your clients? Because I saw your success clients that like I could just scroll for hours and hours. It feels like you've been doing such great work with what you're doing. So what is the factor that's most important for someone who wants to keep the lost weight?
I would say there are two levels. Like first, you have to get out of the environment that got you to become overweight to begin with, and then like a deeper issue would be you have to kind of moreover change the mindset that made it acceptable to you to begin with to be in that environment that led you to be overweight. And there's a lot that goes into that, obviously, but that's kind of like if a person really wants lasting change, they have to approach it at that level.
Mm,
So yeah, that's to answer it in short.
yeah. And also like in the States, I guess it's different from Sweden where there's more obesity in the US. So the work you're doing is really important, right?
Yeah, exactly. So it is obesity is obviously a huge problem in the Western world, especially in like the U.S. and Australia. So yeah, I would say I think it's important.
Yeah.
It's a topic I'm passionate about. So yeah, so
Yeah, and also what we're going to talk about as well. We're going to talk about your book in this episode as well, and that also comes into so much maybe why we have obesity problems that the way we treat the agriculture industry and stuff like that. Uh, so let's talk about your book. It's called Anti-Factory Farming Shopping Guide, right? Your new book.
yeah, exactly. And it's kind of like it's a book I've recently published, and it's like for me, I found finding healthy food in the US. I don't know how it is in Sweden, honestly. It'd be good to chat with you about that.
Mm,
But finding healthy food in the US, like very, very confusing.
mm,
So, like from a personal trainer perspective, like for instance, a lot of trainers just focus on the working out part, but then some of them would always focus on the nutrition part as well. And they would say like, oh, try to eat, like try to go to the grocery store and make your meals. And then like very few of them would focus on actually sourcing like high quality food. Like they would say like, oh, like work out, hit these calories, hit the macronutrients this way, and then make sure to buy organic food. And that would be actually like very obvious and easy back in the 1940s and below, but now it's actually like very complicated. So for instance, like a trainer would say like, oh, go buy free range organic, or like the typical trainer would say like, oh, like try to eat more chicken. Like it's a leaner food, whatever. It'll help you hit your calories and your macros a little bit better. So the person will go to the grocery store and they'll most likely the typical person in the US will just buy like the cheapest chicken. Because for them, in their mind, like all chicken is the same, like this chicken, that chicken, it's whatever. The more expensive one, the cheaper one, it's all the same. But the cheapest version would be kind of like a cage-free. So let's say this person doesn't want to lose weight. They'll go to the grocery store and they'll buy like cage-free chicken. Well, this cage-free chicken, I mean, we can even go on like multiple hours just talking about production quality of cage-free chicken. But basically raised with a tremendous amount of grains. So like chickens, for instance, are omnivores. They're supposed to be eating a wide variety in their diets. So they're eating like insects, bugs, worms. They could be supplemented with grain as well. But with the factory farm chicken, they're fed nothing but predominantly grain, like predominantly like corn and soy. And most definitely that corn and soy is sourced from genetically modified corn and soy, which is grown with a lot of harmful chemicals. So basically what this person is getting exposure to is they're getting exposure to trace amounts of a lot of pesticides, but then on top of that, when you feed an omnivore such as a chicken nothing but corn and soy, it basically hinders or ruins the natural ratio of omega-3 to omega-6 in that meat fiber. And that's kind of important to consider for long-term health, especially for the fat loss client, because when you feed the chicken nothing but corn and soy, it's going to shoot the omega-6 way up and most likely keep the omega-6 at the same level or maybe decrease it a little bit more. And when you have an offset ratio of that omega-6 to omega-3, that's going to cause a tremendous amount of inflammation in the body, in the person that's eating that kind of meat. So last thing you want, especially if you're trying to lose weight, is like more inflammation in your body. And of course, like inflammation comes from many different sources, chronic stress being kind of one of the biggest ones in the Western world because people are constantly on the move and everything. But last thing you want is just another source of inflammation coming from the food you're eating on a daily basis, most likely multiple times a day. So at that level, then like, let's say you have like even a trainer that's a little bit more consciously aware of food production practices, and they'll say like, oh, go buy free range organic chicken. And 99% of the time, once again, I don't know how it is in Sweden, but 99% of the time in the US, the client will go to the grocery store once again and see free range organic chicken and just purchase that. But once again, what's free range? So free range basically indicates that there's like, once again, like a huge warehouse and there are probably like 20, 30, 40,000 chickens like stuck shoulder to shoulder. Usually the square footage is about 1 square foot or 1.5 square feet per chicken. Wow. So it's almost no room. And they usually have kind of like a very small concrete patio where they can kind of roam outside if weather permits and if the planets are aligned in a certain section. one or 2 hours a day, and usually from my experience from the couple of free range operations I've been on, you'll probably see maybe like 50, 60 chickens outside in the small concrete patio. And then the rest of the 30,000+ chickens are just constantly always inside. So in that case, it's the same as basically the production quality that we just went over. Mm-hmm. And so that's the living standards of the chicken, which kind of produces like a few problems. So first, there's a lot of like fecal contamination because a single chicken poops about six pounds of poop in a 4-week period. And multiply by that by like 30,000 chickens, that's going to be a lot of poop that they're just constantly crawling around in, because once again, they're not rotated onto fresh pastures. They're just inside this one barn that's stationary and not going anywhere. So then you get a lot of fecal contamination on the meat. You get a lot of bacteria buildup, and they have to most likely, unless they don't do a lot of crowding, they most likely have to use a lot of antibiotics just to keep the chickens alive. Mm-hmm. And then another problem is once again, going back to a species-specific diet, this is very important when buying any type of meat. So like I mentioned before, chickens are going to be omnivores. They're supposed to be eating worms, bugs, insects, a wide variety of whatever plants and stuff like that. And sometimes they could be supplemented with corn and soy if there isn't enough food on the pasture. But in these operations, even though it's organic, even though it says free range, they're still fed nothing but organic soy and corn. Once again, running into the same problem we talked about before with the omega-3 to omega-6, you're going to get very high omega-6, very low omega-3, and thus that's going to be a pro-inflammatory food group. So that's going to be causing a lot of inflammation in the body of a person that's eating it, especially with like a fitness diet. You're probably eating it a couple times a day, like all week, most likely, you know? So you're getting a lot of, you're getting a lot of exposure to that.
Yeah.
So this is the kind of, and I can keep going on and on, but this is the kind of confusion that's present in the marketplace, because as you can see, the person is trying to find healthy food and it's healthy sounding on the label, but really the production quality is shit. Even at the organic level, although it says organic, it says free range, it says vegetarian fed, which is actually not a good thing. You know what I mean? So it's very confusing for the consumer that just wants to, as simple as it sounds, it's like, dude, I just want healthy food.
Yeah.
But it's like not that simple anymore, you know? And that's kind of the premise of the book, just to basically simplify it, break it down in a very, very simple manner. And so, yeah, for me, like it started with just trying to find quality eggs, which is like super difficult to do. So.
Yeah, because I'm gonna link the video that you have on YouTube, which is a 20-minute video that's really worth watching, because it's really also like confusing to all these labels, the non-GMO, the vegetarian fed, all these nice sounding labels that are just kind of feels like it's hiding something, and it's hard in these days when we're going through this fast agricultural change. I can just say in Sweden, like two generations ago, when my grandpa was young, you know, everybody had like a small kind of farm and their own cows and hens, and were almost like self-sourcing in a way. And now the only way to make it as a farmer here in Sweden today is that you have to go big, or you go bankrupt, kind of. So you get this kind of capitalistic, how can we get as much profit out of having 30,000 hens in one warehouse where they basically kind of stomp each other. And, you know, then they, instead of having good food for them so they can grow and become a good source of food for us, maybe corn and soy is very cheap in the US to give them. So there's so much problems around these topics, and it's getting harder and harder in the jungle to find good food. I was also in the US last year, and it was also hard to find, you know, things that are just single ingredients without any additives or stuff like that. And there's so many labels of fat-free this, and so yeah, I appreciate that you have taken the time to do this. But how did it all start with this? Because I was like, how can you get obsessed by chicken and eggs? But it's very interesting and very important as I watched your video. So how did it all start for you? Was it to you said finding your own kind of good eggs?
Yeah, exactly. Well, really quick question for you. In terms of, is Sweden part of the European Union?
Yes. Yes, we are.
Yeah, so in terms of what we're talking about, then the production practices are very, very similar. I think the European Union has like slightly higher standards, but it's like pretty much very, very parallel to the US. Although I know a lot of countries in the European Union are now incentivizing organic farming a lot more, which is good to see. But so anyway, for the Swedish watchers, just know that there's a lot of overlap in terms of the production practices we'll be talking about. So for me, it started with like I grew up in Ukraine on an off-grid biodynamic farm. So when I came to the US and I saw like these, and yeah, we had like chickens and geese and a wide variety of animals and pigs, and also a wide variety of crops and grapes and everything. And when I came to the US and I went to the supermarket, I'm like, I thought it was all the same. I thought they were producing food the same way we produced food on that farm, you know, like maybe similar to where you're living right now, the way you produced food.
Yeah.
And I'm like, man, these Americans, they've mastered biodynamic farming. to be able to produce this much food and this much variety of food and have it always accessible. And then it was like maybe a few years ago, I ran into Paul Chek's video, The Dirt Facts. Mm-hmm. And he basically outlined somewhat similar topic ranges of what we're outlining now. And it made me think like, oh man, something is really off. Maybe their production practices are extremely different, you know? So then I started investigating more and more, and it started with basically just wanting, at first, like quality eggs. And that was like super confusing. You had like the caged option, then you had cage free, then you had free range, then you had pasture raised, then you had all vegetarian fed, then no vegetarian fed, then organic corn and soy, and then organic free corn and soy. And it was like just super confusing. I'm like, dude, and all of them had beautiful pictures of pasture and eggs running around outside on the cover and everything. And I'm like, man, I just want freaking good food. I don't know, like healthy food. I don't know why it's gotten so complicated. And that's I mean, to make it short, that's basically how it began for me. So yeah, and then I started with eggs, and then kind of went on to learn about crop production with vegetables and fruit, and the various pesticides used in that, and then what the organic certification does and doesn't mean, and then how to raise pigs, how they're raised in factory farmed operations, cows, turkeys, et cetera, et cetera. So supplement production as well.
Yeah, that's something that I've also been pondering about like the last year, to start growing my own food and really know where it's coming from, because it's all the labels and all the nice pictures on the boxes on these healthy hens or chickens, whatever, or cows, and then you see these videos of factory farming where it's just hideous. And how will I know that this is coming from a good source and an ethical way of treating these animals? So I feel like it's something that every person should be taught to where everything comes from, and I think it's really important that also the things that we eat also have a good life before they get into our systems, because I think, as you talked about with the inflammation, that's just a growing ground for all diseases, right? So
exactly. Yeah, and if a person's interested in that, they can look up a thing called the inflammation theory of disease. And it'll kind of describe that like 90+% of all diseases arise just from chronic inflammation in the body. Mm-hmm. And one thing I hear, it's like sometimes I hear people say, like, I do a lot of grocery store tours, and they're like, man, I've been eating this like factory farm food my whole life and I feel just fine. Meanwhile, the person is like, like 40 pounds overweight, has tremendous amount of joint issues, probably taking like 3 or 4 pharmaceuticals just to get by the day, and needs like 5 cups of coffee. I'm like, dude, you're not fine, If anything, you're just in denial right now, and you don't know, or maybe you just don't even know like a better way of life, So, yeah.
Yeah, I think we get used to one state of being, and we take this as, oh, this is how life is supposed to feel like, how life is supposed to be. And I think that's why when people start to exercise, probably your clients, when they start to realize, oh, this is just another level to where I was at. And I think it's important to look at ourselves and see where we can grow and evolve. And food is such a humongous part of our lives, right? So
yeah, exactly. And I don't know like the general health of the Swedish citizen, but there are a few problems sorry, I have like my cat running around with some kind of animal that he tore in half over here, so I'm just trying to make sure he doesn't throw it on my bed later on. Yeah, so it's kind of like so 2 problems in the US. One, to touch on your question a little bit earlier. Yeah. The average person is extremely detached from the farming lifestyle. Like probably like 99% of people have never been on a farm, never raised on a farm. So that's why it makes it easy. Even like, for instance, I was raised on a farm, but the marketing still got to me, Like I didn't even know the difference. And I still had that advantage of being raised on a farm and everything. As you yourself, you still find it confusing, although a bit more of the background of food production. So imagine a person that has never been to a farm, never been on a farm, like, first of all, it's probably like, you don't know what you don't know. So it's not even in their conscious mind to even be able to question, like, oh, is there a difference between this like $1.20 for 18 eggs versus like $8 for 10 eggs? You know what I mean? It's not even in their conscious mind to even question that. Second problem is, pretty much anywhere you walk around in the US, like, and I'm not even exaggerating, it's just generally the case, like 9 out of 10 people are like full of mental and physical pain, like full of disease and obesity. So they don't have a reference point of how to compare themselves to what a healthy individual is like. So being diseased and obese, being like not mentally healthy, it is the norm now, you know? So it's kind of like, for them, that is what being alive is, you know what I mean? And that's kind of really the underlying sad reality of what led to the acceptance of the factory farm model. Because if people don't buy this stuff, the companies won't produce it. And on top of that, if people don't buy large quantities of this food because the vertically integrated companies are relying on such high volumes, the second those volumes even die down just a little bit, the companies go bankrupt.
Yeah.
It's like that fast. It doesn't even have to be a dramatic shift in the market, just a small shift in the market, and the companies will go bankrupt overnight because it's so expensive to maintain all of these trucks that supply the corn, the feed, the mills that produce the corn and soy, the veterinarians, all the farmers, the slaughterhouses. It's so expensive that the second the market value just drops a little bit, they instantly have to go most likely out of business. So yeah, I mean, they're only being sustained because people keep buying them, and people keep buying them because, like another good Czech practitioner, Jator Pierre, I had a chat with him about it many times. People keep buying them because most people are living a life they don't want to live. Exactly. And they don't care enough to fuel the body, because why, you know, it doesn't make sense. I don't care for this life too much, so why should I care about feeding my body the right food so I have the right energy to carry on what I want in this life? You know what I want to do. So that's a deeper issue and past what we want to talk about here, but to kind of, I guess, a little bit thoroughly answer your question. So
yeah, it's interesting that we have this. Most people probably have just to their meat or to eggs. It's just they have the styrofoam, you know, with a plastic over it, and doesn't see how you slaughter an animal, or how you even kill an animal by yourself. And it's huge, the obesity problem in the U.S. and in Sweden we don't have as much, but there are also a lot of obesity. And it's interesting how it feels like society is degrading the more technologically advanced, and how much we, you know, just do stuff in a bigger bulks of things. And also talking about Czech, or Paul Czech, I listened to a podcast a month ago, and he talked about how obesity is, as you said, like people that may not have, you know, haven't raised their level of consciousness. So instead of they may be living a life that they don't want to live, and so they feel their soul wants more, so they fill themselves up and with more than they can eat, and they become fat because their soul craves for a change or want to do something more than a dead-end zombie job. So that's also very interesting to put that in perspective as well.
Yeah, exactly. Like, good point. Exactly. So that's like very well said.
So what other, I saw in the video, the 20-minute video, that you referenced to a book called Prison Chicken, Poisoned Eggs.
Yeah, that's the first book I read on trying to investigate this whole entire food ordeal and kind of demystify, kind of trying to make finding like healthy food actually like very, very easy. So don't know if I have it next to me. Actually, I do have it next to me, but yeah. So yeah, you had a question about that book?
Yeah, how did that affect you and this journey with your book?
Well, yeah, like I mentioned, it was the first one. It was the first one I read in a long series of books to kind of create my own book, and very well written, very to the point. It just basically outlines egg production, how it's evolved, and how the factory farm model kind of like operates. So it talks about, you know, it breaks it down. You got 4 categories. So caged, cage-free. So caged is shit, cage-free is shit, free range is shit. And then pasture raised is hit and miss. A lot of them are for instance, out in pasture, but even that could be a little confusing. For instance, like a lot of times people, regarding a good coach, sometimes coaches will be like, oh, just shop at a small farmer's market. And this is hit and miss too, because if they're a small farmer, just as like if they're a self-employed person, that doesn't mean just because they're self-employed and small scale, it doesn't mean they're like competent and very good. All that really says is just they're a small farmer in your local area. So one good thing is you are supporting your local economy. The money is definitely staying in that ecosystem, which is great too. And you're eating food that's produced locally also, which is, has a lot of connection to, I don't know the deep science to it, but a lot of connection to gut health and your overall well-being. Eating food that's actually in your area versus eating food that's imported from like many countries away. But it doesn't mean it doesn't indicate like the highest food production practices, because for instance, touching on your egg question. So let's say a trainer's like, oh, go buy pasture raised eggs from your local small farmer. And I would go, okay, so I have a small farm. I'm willing to go there on Saturdays during the 3 hours they're open and kind of buy it from them.
Yeah.
So this farmer could have like a pasture, an enclosed pasture, so the chickens are getting to run around outside, which is great. But if they don't rotate them onto different fields like almost daily, the thing is, if you have like 50 to 100 to 150 chickens on an acre of pasture, they eat pretty much everything in like a day.
Oh, wow.
Like there's no more for them to eat, because the chickens are basically like pooping and eating like all day. That's their mission from waking up to sunset, man. Yeah. So it's like, it's pretty laid back lifestyle. But so one thing, if they're not rotating them onto fresh pasture, then they're going to have to feed them a lot of corn and soy. And so one, is the corn and soy organic? So sometimes it's not. So you would have to watch out for that. Although a small farmer, they could be feeding them GMO corn and soy, which is kind of like inexpensive. That's why they opt for that oftentimes. And it gets the bird to grow a lot faster too, because it's dense in nutrients. Another thing is, okay, so maybe they are organic, but they're still feeding them corn and soy and they're not rotating them onto fresh pasture. So there are two problems there. One is they're going to get fecal contamination, because once again, like I told you, each bird poops quite a bit. So they're going to be kind of running around on that. So you're going to get fecal matter on the chickens. And then once again, the chickens are going to get sick a little bit more because they're getting that exposure to bacteria. So the farmer might have to implement then like some kind of medicine, or possibly like a round of antibiotics that's distributed in their food or their water, So in that case, you would have to ask the farmer like 3 questions. Like, 1, are you rotating them onto fresh pasture daily? 2, usually like if they have like 200 square foot of space per chicken, that's probably like a good indication of they're not overcrowding and kind of overextending their production practices. And 3, most likely they are going to have supplemental feed. So in that case, you do want kind of like to make sure they're supplementing with still organic corn and soy. But once again, because they're being rotated onto fresh pasture daily, they have a more balanced diet, because they're getting exposed to the new bugs and the insects in that new fresh pasture on a daily basis. Usually kind of rotate them around on the 30th day or so. So the pasture has time to replenish. And that way they're always getting an abundance of this balanced diet. And there are some farmers that just have supplemental feed without corn and soy. That would be the best. Like in my area, there's a company called like Happy Hens, and they sell chickens that abide by all those practices I just mentioned and don't supplement with corn and soy. So if you want to maximize your eggs, that would be the option to go for. That's kind of rare to find, but that's the kind of standard you want to kind of seek out. So.
Yeah, it reminds me of, because I grew up on the farm that I'm at right now, and we don't have cattle right now. Well, we have 30 cows, and we have to rotate them during the summers so that because they ate everything in a couple of days.
Exactly.
And then you have to rotate them, and because they wouldn't have any food anywhere else, But it seems like a jungle, Eugene. And what is the best way to get a good source of protein, meat, chicken, eggs? What have you discovered along your journey with this?
Well, it varies from category to category. So quality pigs are going to be produced differently than turkey, than cows, for instance, than goats or sheep. one good website to check out, I honestly don't know if they have like listing for Sweden, but it's called eatwild.com.
Mm.
And it has like for the US, it has like a map of the US, and each individual state, you can click on the state where you are, and it'll show you arrows of exactly where a pasture raised biodynamic operation is. And then you can contact it. It makes it like very, very easy. And then your next step is just basically to, most likely the production quality is very high if it's on that website already, but then your next step is maybe to customize it for yourself. So find out, like for the eggs, if you're very specific, like if you have like some gnarly gut issues, then you might not want the eggs to be supplemented with corn and soy, you know?
Mm.
Or you might not want to be eating eggs to begin with, but if you are insistent on it, then you have to be very specific with those. Then you have to learn to ask those questions. But that website is a really good step in the right direction, I would say.
I just put that down. I'm gonna check that after this call because I haven't heard about that before. I've heard about. I haven't checked him that much out, but I know this guy Joel Salatin is like a big
He's
guy.
like a,
Yeah. You probably know more about him than I do.
Yes, actually. So to answer your question, if people order his shoot, I forgot the name of the DVD, but Joel Salatin, like semester series, like learning semester series. Shoot. Sorry, Joel. I couldn't do the sales pitch for you here, man. I forgot the damn name of the series. But that's actually a really good series because it teaches you. He's a very knowledgeable farmer, and I actually learned a lot from him to be able to write my own book as well. Not for him directly, but from his material and his video content and all that stuff. And he will basically outline the A+ production practices of every single meat group available. So if you watch those videos and they're like an hour and a half each for each category, you will have a solid enough understanding of how to ask the right questions. Because if you go to, even if a small farmer is transparent and you go to their farm, if you don't know what to look for, like, how do you know what to look for? Exactly. You know what I mean? So it does, like, it could say like, oh, it's clean and there's a lot of waste everywhere and that's obvious. But for instance, if you're not very knowledgeable about species specific diets, like what the animal should be eating to maximize the nutritional profile of the meat, or you're not knowledgeable about crop production practices for vegetables and fruits, like, how do you know what to even look for? You know what I mean? Like, I can show you anything then as a small farmer and you'll believe me because it's out in the open, you know? Mm. So if they watch this series, I think it'll educate them enough on being able to know exactly what to look for or to know exactly which questions to ask.
Yeah, because I think that's the hardest thing in today's society is that we have become so detached from nature in a way that even knowing, as I see my granddad knows so much about how to cultivate land and grow your own vegetables and how to sow seeds and whatever. And I don't know shit. I know a lot about technology. I know how to do a Zoom call. I know a lot about those kind of things, but these kind of old practices that has been going down from generations to generation is slowly deteriorating. And that's why I've been this year trying to grow some own like potatoes and stuff like that, just to try out and to really, before he pass on some knowledge that is very needed in this day and age, I think. Because what would happen if something would happen, a big catastrophic event that would, put us off from the supply of these mass industry food providers, and nobody knows how to cultivate their own potatoes or whatever. So how's that been for you as well? Because you also grow your own food, right?
Yeah, I'm getting back into it. I'm slowly phasing back into it. A girlfriend and I, our goal is to basically move like semi-off grid in about like 2 or 3 years or so. So slowly phasing back into it. But to answer your question, yeah, I mean, I read, I'll send you this cool graphic, but it basically shows if like the grid or if the grid went offline, like basically like fresh water and food would be out in like 1 week. Yeah. In like in a typical city. So at that point, it's like, you better be a gun owner because that's really your only hope. And it's like a very bad hope at that, because once again, you don't have anyone that knows how to make their food that's able to be self-reliant at all.
Mm.
And in 1 week, you're going to have a bunch of people that aren't going to have any water or aren't going to have any food, and they're going to be like very, very angry, you know?
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, to answer your question, um, yeah, I mean, there is no self-dependence, but then again, I don't know how to make a computer, you know, like for
Yeah,
instance,
exactly.
everything's kind of moving on more to like niche specific, you know, like you just
Exactly.
focus on this part, you just focus on this part. And I actually talked to Donald Hoffman. He's a professor at UCI about this subject. And the problem with kind of society being niche specific is in their knowledge is it's actually decreasing the overall size of the human brain.
Oh, wow.
So like I forgot the exact numbers, but over like a 20,000 year period, the human brain has lost like almost like 15% of its total mass. Because the less you have to know of a variety of topics, the smaller your brain will become to be able to basically conserve calories,
Mm-hmm.
because it is a major consumption of calories. So anyway, just random. I kind of go off on tangents sometimes, but just like
I love it.
random fact. So
Because that makes sense as well. Like before we had cell phones, when I grew up, I had to remember my friends' phone numbers and directions to people's places. Now you have Google in your phone, and you can outsource everything. You outsource everything. So the more technologically advanced we become, also we forget our foundation that we stand upon in a way. And as you say, it will be interesting to see. Just to put it in perspective, in Sweden, in total, we are 10 million people in Sweden, and
oh okay,
it's quite
yeah,
one
you
of
guys are
the
small, man.
yeah it's quite a big area wise. It's quite a big country, but it's very not that populated up here in the north. But to put that in perspective with like California, that has like 30 million, I think, as a state, or even more.
Yeah, I forget the exact numbers, but I think the U.S. is up to like probably almost like 400 million
Oh,
citizens
wow.
at this point. So
But imagine like a city like LA or New York having no trucks coming in with food.
yeah, like I
Yes,
mentioned, 7 days,
yeah,
and
it's crazy to think about.
yep.
It would be a civil war on the hands of the
Yeah,
American.
I think your safest bet is to be in Sweden then at that point, man, because you guys maybe it's like too cold and everyone would be like, "Oh fuck it, it's not worth it," you know? Yeah.
But it's so fascinating to know that so much things that are abundant and we take for granted, and how quick that could be taken away from us, and in a war situation or whatever, if a country comes in and tries to barricade us off from getting any new supplies of food, because we have become so dependent on getting it from export rather than having it self-sourced. And that's kind of why I want to learn how to cultivate some of my own land. And I've been harvesting some potatoes this past week, and been so happy about going out in the soil and taking it up by myself, and making cooking the potatoes with some dill, and then just eat it, and knowing that I put the potato down in the soil and there is no additives, there are no hormones or whatever in this. And it feels really good and satiating to do that it's only 10 meters from my kitchen. Um,
Yeah,
so
exactly. And then remember, like no one's going to care about you as much as you.
exactly, yeah.
So you have to kind of keep that in mind too. No one's going to be as diligent about keeping you healthy as you. So if you have like high standards, most likely the farmers aren't going to be able to do that for you, you know? There are a few exceptions like Joel Salatin. There's a guy named the Barefoot Farmer. There are a lot of good farmers out there, but I'm just saying it's like no one's going to pay as much attention to you as you. So as a
Exactly.
general rule in anything. So
And probably the farmers nowadays have to make it big in order to not get bankrupt, and that's a huge issue I think that we are facing. And I can't say that I know too much about the subject, though that's why it's so interesting to talk with you about this.
yeah, it's tricky. I don't know too much. I don't know honestly like the hardcore facts about the economics of farming.
Yeah.
But honestly, even big farms are constantly on the verge of going bankrupt because how basically 95% of food is produced, it's probably the same exact case in Sweden as well, is it's produced through vertical integration. So vertical integration, basically how it works is, let's say I'm a huge corporate chicken producer. and you're a small chicken farmer. I come to you and I say like, look, man, I have the slaughterhouses, I have the marketing, I have the corporate department, I have all the trucks, I have the patents for these genetically modified seeds that get the chickens to grow fast, I have the veterinarians, I have all the medicines and vaccines. All I need you to do is just grow these 20,000 birds for me for 4 weeks. I'll bring you, I even have the hatcheries. I'll even do the hatching. I'll bring you the small chicks at the beginning of the month. I'll come pick them up at the end of the month. All you're responsible for doing is like literally just growing these chickens to my standards. So if I say they have to be fed this, you're going to do it. If I say they have to be indoors, you're going to do it. If I say they have to have these kind of drugs, you're going to do it. This is a huge relief for most farmers because it's kind of like why most people go to work to begin with. Because it's kind of scary to work for yourself oftentimes, and you have to have a wide variety of skills. You have to have marketing skills, this and that, accounting skills, plus the skill of your trade. So it's overwhelming for a lot of people, including a lot of farmers. So when a company comes to them and say like, look, man, I just need you to do just this one thing now, and that's it. A lot of them would be like, okay, you know, sounds good. But then what happens is they give up their freedom in the sense of they give up their production practices, you know, like now you have to follow this big company's production practices. Another problem is like usually when they come to you with this offer, they'll be like, okay, you don't have a facility that can house 20, 30, 40,000 chickens. We need you to build the facility, and that's going to actually come out of your pocket. But we already have a bank contract, so a bank will loan you $400,000 if you open this facility for us. And it'll guarantee you like this much income because we'll be bringing you chickens, and each chicken is like whatever we'll buy from you for $1 or whatever, or like even less, and you'll get this much guaranteed income. And the farmer's like, oh, okay, I'll take out this loan and I'll put a lien on my house and I'll put a lien on my land to get this loan, and I'll build this chicken house. So now this huge corporation, me, it has you kind of like by the balls, you know?
Yeah.
Because now you're in this tremendous amount of debt. And basically, you have to do what I tell you, because if you lose the contract with me, there's only like 2 or 3 other companies in the entire country that are going to even hire you, you know? So imagine if you just had 3 employers in your entire country.
Yeah.
You know? It's like, dude, you don't have any options, you know, because of the large amount of consolidation. You don't have an option of not doing what I tell you to do. So now, like, what happens, I first sign like a year contract with you, and I guarantee to pay you every month this amount. But then after you've already invested this money, a year goes by, and I'm like, you know what? I'm going to only do month-to-month contracts with you now. Like, what are you going to say?
Yeah.
You know, you're not going to say anything because you've already invested all this money into building these huge warehouses and all the inputs that go with it. You don't have anyone, probably close to anyone else that's going to buy your chickens, and you need to produce this large amount of chickens per month to be able to even pay off the debt, moreover, to make a living off of it. You know, so it's kind of like that's how farming exists now.
Yeah.
And that's why it's kind of like, and that's how 99% of meat is produced, like from pork to chicken to turkeys. Like 99% of meat is most likely produced the same way in Sweden under those conditions. So that's why you see, and in the U.S., like for instance, grain is subsidized by the U.S. taxpayer. So it actually costs the company very little to feed these animals grain. That's why they're reliant on grain. If it wasn't subsidized, they wouldn't be able to make a profit.
Yeah.
So you see, they're getting the U.S. citizen to pay for their business expenses. And on top of that, let's say you go out of business and you forfeit on the bank loan. Like what happens is, once again, the U.S. taxpayer bails out that bank loan, because I forgot the name of it, but there's some clause and it's like some agricultural relief program. Basically, if a bank loans the money to a farm and the farm goes bankrupt, the bank will be able to get that money reimbursed by the U.S. taxpayer.
Oh, wow.
So see, the bank, it's like, it's a win-win for them, dude, because they're collecting interest on the payments while you're in business. And then if you go out of business, it doesn't matter. They're going to get their money back anyways.
Yeah.
You won't have to pay for it. Like they'll take your land and they'll take your house, and then whatever's left over of the payment, the taxpayer will just subsidize that difference. So you can see these factory farms, and I'm pretty sure it's the same exact way in Sweden. I don't know 100%. They're living off of the fact that they're outsourcing their costs to the U.S. taxpayer. Most likely the Swedish taxpayer as well. So a lot of times the Swedish taxpayer will go into the grocery store and they'll be like, man, this chicken's like $3 less than this like pasture-raised organic chicken. But it's not really $3 less because you're paying through your taxes to have it $3 less.
Yeah.
So it's the same damn price for you. The only person making a profit out of it is these big corporate companies that are running these vertically integrated systems.
Yeah, and that creates kind of the laws and the regulations as well, because they're so big, and there's no room for the small farmers to have a say in this. I think there's a documentary I saw a couple of years ago there that also had I think outlined some problem in the American food industry where they had a lot of Mexicans working at the slaughterhouses so that they could really have the prices low. But
exactly.
the companies were in no problem. It was just illegal immigrants because they were there illegally. If they were to, it was basically slavery, because if they said no or complained about the hours, they would just become like shipped out of the U.S. right away. And the company had no repercussions at all. So it's really, really fucked up that how the big corporations can really set the playing ground for themselves in order to fend off any other competition, I guess.
Yeah, exactly. And that's like another issue. I don't address these issues in the book. I just mainly stick to in the book of how to find quality food, because there's so many issues with this system. I didn't want to confuse the reader too much. Yeah. But yes, that's another problem. Another issue most people don't know about is like a lot of workers at slaughterhouses, they have to, and this is well documented, I'm not exaggerating. You can simply do a simple Google search and you'll find many, many articles, many investigative studies proving this. A lot of slaughter workers have to wear diapers when they're at work because they can't slow down the slaughter facility just because one person in the slaughter line wants to go to the bathroom.
Whoa.
You know, a lot of people don't know that gross fact, but that's like very common business practice. So it's like, dude, Ruben, you can't go to the bathroom, man. We can't slow down this line. Remember, slaughterhouses are processing like 150, 200 chickens a minute.
Yeah.
A minute. So if they slowed down the slaughterhouse just for you to go to the bathroom, that's going to slow down the production practice a tremendous amount. And remember, these slaughterhouses are so expensive to run, they have to produce these massive numbers to even have a chance of a profit. You know, so it's like, dude, your bathroom break, well, you have a diaper now. Just pee in your diaper, you know? And I know some people are going to listen to it and like, no, it can't be. But just don't even take my word for it. Just do a simple Google search. Do your own investigative work, and you'll see that that is the case.
Wow.
And yeah, I mean, in terms of the bringing immigrants on board, for sure. Like now it's like very popular in the U.S. to be anti-illegal immigrant, you know? But the funny thing is, it's like, dude, a lot of these people that are like anti-illegal immigrants, so first of all, their ancestors are illegal immigrants, okay? Even if they're from Europe. Second, it's like, dude, these people are buying the factory farm food that's reliant on these illegal immigrants to produce. It's like, okay, so first of all, if you want the illegal immigrants to disappear, a large portion of them are in the agricultural industry. Just stop buying factory farm food. Go to your local farmer and support your local farmer then, you know, and see how many of them are willing to do that. I find like a lot of this immigration nonsense, it's kind of like, I'm against it as long as it's convenient for me. But if it's inconvenient, then I'm just going to look the other way, you know?
Yeah.
So, and then there are a bunch of shady immigrant practices. Like, for instance, a lot of tomato farmers in Florida, there's a good book called Tomatoland. I forgot the author's name off the top of my head. No, Paul Check, he's good at remembering everyone's freaking name, but I'm not too good at it. So, but anyway, he talked about like how it's common for like Mexican coyotes to go find like very uneducated people living in Mexico and then kind of promise them like a lot of work in like agriculture in the US. They're like, oh yeah, you pay me $2,000 to smuggle you across the border, but then I have a job waiting for you that's going to pay you like $300 a week, which is like a tremendous amount of money for someone living in kind of like some very, very broke area of Mexico. And they'll be like, okay, then they come up with this money, they pay you pay them, and now they're indebted to this coyote, this smuggler, and they go transport them to some farm in the middle of nowhere, and they're like, okay, yes, I said $500 a week or $300 a week, no doubt, but now you have to pay to live in this RV with like 10 other people, and you have to pay for the food we bring you because there's no food nearby, and if you get injured, you have to pay for the medical costs too.
Yeah.
So now all of a sudden they can't ever pay back that $2,000.
Yeah.
You know, and if they try to run away, these coyotes basically go to the families of these people in Mexico and say if they don't come back, they're going to end up like killing the family.
Whoa.
You know? And a lot of the white farmers that own these big farms, they're like, oh, we don't know about these practices, but it's funny, like everyone knows about the practices except the business owner, you know?
Yeah.
I find that hard to believe. So
yeah,
so that's pretty common as well. That book is pretty good, and it basically just goes over just that problem. So
wow, that's so interesting. Yeah, because a lot of countries are run, I guess, on illegal immigrants, or the U.S. because no people wants to do that shitty kind of job. It's the same in Sweden right now. No one wants to pick berries anymore, so there comes a lot of Thai berry pickers in the summertime that usually also get caught up in these kind of weird slave situation that they are promised a lot of profit for their kind of standards, and then they get kind of mistreated because they don't have any papers, they don't have any rights, basically. So it's really horrific to have that going on.
Yeah, and I get it. It's a competitive marketplace now, especially since it's like an international marketplace.
Yeah, exactly.
Farmers aren't only competing with farmers like in that country, they're competing with farmers around the whole entire world now.
Yeah.
You know, so it was already super competitive and super low profits.
Yeah.
Even before the advent of the like a huge international market, for instance, or factory farming, but now it's even like on another level competitive. So I don't know. I don't have a solution for them, but taking advantage of the immigrants is definitely like a huge problem in general. So and these vertically integrated companies take advantage of just their normal citizens too, like I described to you through that contract system. You know, they kind of like almost like a racketeering scam. Just kind of like almost feels like that. You know, like they tell you this, and as long as you build these huge sheds and take on this amount of payment, we'll guarantee you this, but then they kind of like swap the contracts. Usually the farmer isn't too savvy with legal stuff, you know, and doesn't have the money to hire a lawyer to read over the paperwork and stuff like that. And they totally know this, and they take advantage. In fact, there's a good book called The Meat Racket by Christian Leonard. I forgot exactly, but that's one of my favorite books. And it's the way he wrote it is honestly like super interesting because it basically goes over the two people that invented factory farming. So Don and John Tyson, in like basically the 1950s, they invented factory farming, and it goes over the step-by-step process of how they basically put the bulk majority of poultry farmers and pork producers out of business in the US. And it's like so interesting because it's so schemy. You can't wait until the next page. You're like, man, what kind of scheme are they going to pull next? You know, it's like these guys are like so shady. It's like, what kind of bullshit are they going to pull next? I'm just curious, you know?
Wow.
And like, it was a really interesting read. It has nothing to do with like quality of meat, just more over the business practice of factory farming and how it took over like America and then kind of has become like an international food production system.
That's fascinating. So fascinating. I find it very fascinating. But I wanna come back also to your life also, Eugene. I am speaking of immigration. You are of Ukrainian heritage, and when did you come to the U.S.? What's your kind of background?
Yeah, I came to the U.S. in 1995, so it's been like quite a while already. I'm from Ukraine. I was there when it was still like the USSR, so way back then. And I grew up kind of like in an off-grid, like biodynamic farm, like I mentioned. And then I've honestly been living in California for the most part since then. So.
Yeah. What made you move, or your parents move, I guess?
Yeah, they just dragged me along in like a suitcase. Didn't have much say at that age, you know?
Yeah.
So.
Cool.
Yeah, that's my story.
Cool. Right. And then you've been doing the life coaching thing for 12 years, you said? Something like that?
Yep, I've been doing personal training for like about, I forgot the years, but it's been quite a while, probably around 12 years.
Yeah.
I started it like at around college, just like super part-time because it provided flexible hours and I liked working out a lot and liked the lifestyle. And then honestly, after college, I kind of like looked at the job market and I didn't see it possible being in good shape, like having a corporate job or a job with like very intensive hours. And I was luckily training people throughout college, and I saw like the effects of doing that kind of job for like 20 or 30 years, you know? And I'm like, man, it's kind of going to be very tough to live this health conscious lifestyle going down this traditional path. So I stuck with training because I enjoyed it and it provided me the lifestyle like I wanted, you know, the freedom of schedule, the autonomy, and moreover, the ability to kind of move dynamically throughout the day instead of being either stationary, like standing or sitting, which I find is like extremely debilitating to like the mind and the body.
Yeah, for sure. But what got you? Have you always been into training, or was there some point in your life where you really got into it, or has it always been integrated in your lifestyle?
Yeah, I mean, I've been working out with my dad since I was 5, man.
Oh wow.
And so I've been doing it pretty much like my entire life. Yeah. And I just honestly just naturally fell into it. It's one of those things where it was okay to do like 8 or 10 hours a day and you didn't even notice the time flying by, you know? Like I remember I got into hockey for a very long time and I would practice like just a single move for like 8 hours.
Oh, really?
Every day until it was like mastered, you know?
Yeah.
So it's interesting, and I don't see myself having interest in doing like really anything else. So.
And I'm also curious about how it is, because as you said, it's easier to take maybe the corporate route and have a more stable job. And I've also, one of my biggest mentors is Elliot Hulse. And he talked about, but when he started, it wasn't kind of that kind of industry, you know. It's become more easy, I guess, these days with YouTube and the internet and stuff like that. How has that journey been for you? Because you were you know, almost starting when internet or YouTube and before smartphones, and how, what has been the challenges for you in that business?
Well, really quick, can you repeat like the last 2 sentences? It had like an internet connection issue, and I noticed it kind of blocked out.
I was saying.
You're saying I basically stopped hearing you after like Elliot Hulse was one of my mentors.
Oh yeah, and he when he started, YouTube wasn't a big thing, and the internet was still, it wasn't in its cradle, but it's like now it's easier to become famous through YouTube or stuff like that, and it must have been more of a jungle to get your stuff out there, and you done it for 12 years somewhere along that line. And what has been the challenges for you in that line of work?
Yeah, honestly, at least from my recollection, I remember like I was one of the first trainers in Orange County to even have like a website.
Oh wow.
And I remember all the trainers are like, no one's gonna go to the stupid website to get clients, you know?
Yeah.
Like so yeah, I mean it's done a big shift. Now pretty much like you're not a legitimate business unless like you have a website, you know?
Yeah.
Like a website is just like the default, the starter package, you know, the starter kit of like getting a business going. So I like it a lot, man. I think it's made education a lot easier, especially with YouTube. You can pretty much access like any very knowledgeable person in any field will most likely have some kind of content on YouTube, whether they're being interviewed on a podcast or they have their own podcast going on. So it's made things a lot easier. Also, it's given voice to pretty much everyone. Like to speak out against like factory farming, like in the 1960s would be like impossible. Like you wouldn't be able to get your voice out because you have to get it on the news or on the newspaper, which is like really tough to do because it's like expensive and then it's et cetera, et cetera. But now it's like Direct Action Everywhere is doing great work on putting out content on anti-factory farm content. So is Mercy for Animals. And like stuff like that, you know? So I think it's really cool.
Yeah, I also like the fact and idea that everybody can be a broadcaster, like me having a mic out here and a webcam, and I can put out this show, even though it might not have millions of followers or subscribers. I can still do my thing and really investigate people and ideas that I find interesting, and to broadcast that to those people who are into that niche is really, in a way, really liberating, I think. And the internet is such a liberating thing, I would say.
Yeah, exactly. And it kind of like takes power away from like consolidation a little bit, in my opinion, you know? So not only just a few like elite people have voices,
Yeah.
but like pretty much anyone can have a voice. I guess the next step is for the average person just to be like very educated, you know, you know, to make sure their voice is actually like spitting the right message and not being too annoying, you know?
Exactly. Yeah.
So, but the opportunity is there, which is a good thing. So.
Yeah, because as you said, there's so much resources on YouTube that you can find on training and whatever. The big issue maybe in these day and ages is that we have too much information, and we have people that are becoming almost like echo chamber communities that have these fixed ideas, and that they kind of self-perpetuate in those communities or whatever, in those groups, Facebook groups or whatever.
Yeah, exactly.
So that
Yeah, and yeah, that even goes back to what we were talking about earlier. You know, all the labeling, confusion,
yeah,
and the grocery. It's representative of exactly that culture. You know.
yeah, that's
So
so true. That's so true. But I'm also curious in your journey, when you found Paul Chek, and how that's journey, and how you integrated the more holistic approach, or has the holistic approach always been a part of your training and your coaching?
honestly, I would say it's been a part of my training and coaching since day one.
Mm,
I mean, that was the reason why I didn't get a corporate job after college. You know,
yeah.
because I saw it wouldn't lay the foundation of a health conscious lifestyle,
Mm,
and it would just provide a tremendous amount of obstacles to staying mentally and physically healthy.
mm.
And that I can talk about for like hours on end, like very passionate about that subject as well.
Yeah.
How I found Paul Chek. I mean, I found Paul Chek through that video, The Dirt Facts. I don't think it's nearly as popular as any of his other videos, but he basically goes over the like soil health. He was giving some lecture. It was like old, like 1970s film.
Oh wow.
I mean, it looked like extremely, extremely old video footage. I don't know exactly when it was produced.
Yeah.
But yeah, he goes over basically kind of what we've been chatting on here, but moreover with soil science, you know, how the health of the topsoil in specific has been eroded or kind of watered down over the years with factory farming and all this introduction of tremendous amount of pesticides and all that stuff. So that's how I found him. And then I liked his videos, man, because he's like, he had a chalkboard in the background. He just like didn't give a fuck, you know? No fancy like CGI intros. Yeah. He's like, this is what I'm talking about today, and that's it, man. And he had like a good holistic message. So, and I like the fact that he was like drug free. That's like rare to find with YouTubers, with health and fitness YouTubers that are like living a drug free lifestyle and also a healthy lifestyle in general. That was like very rare to find in the health industry, ironically, you know?
Yeah, that's interesting. It says a lot. But yeah, also what I see, what you say that about Paul is that he doesn't have to have CGI. He doesn't have to have that fancy schmancy thing in the background, because what he delivers is value. So therefore, it doesn't matter, you know, his message comes through anyway to those people who wants to take part of the value that he brings. And he's also been a major source of value in my life as well. And as I said, Elliot Hulse has been one of my biggest inspirations. And Elliot is also, I think, HLC 3 or 4 as well. So he brings a lot of that, I think, to his teachings as well.
Yeah.
But what other people have been inspiring you on the training path or the coaching path?
Honestly, when Greg Plitt was still alive, I thought he was really cool.
Who?
Greg Plitt. I don't know if you know him.
Greg Plitt. Yeah.
He was like super entertaining and like super goofy.
Yeah.
Bear Grylls was really cool. I liked him and his travel channel. That was like really awesome. I forgot his last name, but I think his website is like rosstraining.com. I remember I was into his stuff a long time ago. It's kind of like low-tech training systems that are like very balanced. It was like really, really cool. There are a couple of other ones, man, but honestly, I've been so in kind of like in the trenches with this farming stuff for the past 2 years. I kind of like forgot a lot of the names of who I used to follow in the physical training arena.
Yeah.
Paul Check, I follow a lot of his stuff. I used to follow a lot of like Charles Poliquin stuff.
Yeah.
I don't know if you're familiar with Charles Poliquin, but his stuff was really cool. I know they're friends with Paul Check for a while, so.
Yeah, cool. Yeah, I haven't. I think I've heard the name, but I don't know who it is actually. I think I've heard it mentioned somewhere. Yeah, we'll probably check that out as well. I've been putting down notes myself here, and for resources that I probably will put in the show notes as well if I remember it all. Yeah, cool. And what is alive in you right now in your business and with this? I guess this new book, of course. But what are you looking forward to right now?
Honestly, I'm trying to, I actually have a copy of the book right here. Yeah, so it's like very small, so as you can see, and that's how I intended it to be. It has like a bunch of like colorful illustrations in it and everything. I just intended it to be small and to the point so people can spend less time reading. It does come with a detailed video series that I think is like an hour and a half long. Yeah. So they can spend less time reading, more time watching those videos, and more importantly, a lot of time taking action, because that's what's really going to kind of produce that change. So I've just been honestly just trying to promote this book, and that's really about it, man. Just trying to find different avenues to kind of thank you for having me on the show. Trying to find different podcasts to be in to talk about, to kind of make it more visible of the type of, bring more into conscious awareness that there is a huge quality difference in factory farm food versus like even supermarket level organic, moreover biodynamic organically produced food. There's like a huge difference, and it's obvious in the health of the population. Because a lot of people, like I mentioned in the beginning, will say like, I've been eating this factory farm food my whole life and I feel just fine. And then I'm like, dude, the only thing that's happening is you're like in a deep state of denial, you know? There's nothing fine about how you feel at all. And the sad part is like, the people don't feel good, and they support an industry that's also polluting and destroying the earth and causing misery upon billions of animals yearly. So it's kind of like a vicious cycle of misery. It's like the animals are miserable because they're being produced in like miserable, like Nazi concentration camp environments. Then this energy of like misery is then being transplanted into the people that eat the food, and they're miserable. And then they buy more of that shit, and it's kind of like a vicious cycle of like retardedness. Yeah. So yeah, that's my take on it.
Yeah. And where can people find your book, Eugene?
Yeah, right now I just sell it on my website or on Amazon.
Yeah.
Amazon.com. I don't know if they have Amazon in Sweden, but they probably do.
Yeah, we have.
Okay.
Sometimes a bit longer shipping than.
They're like, you guys get 2 week shipping, not 2 day shipping.
Sometimes,
that's the prime deal on
exactly.
Sweden, Amazon.
Yeah, exactly. Kind of.
They're like, there's a mountain of snow. There's no way this package is getting to your door like in 2 days. We'd like you to get it at the end of summer. You know?
Exactly. You have to fight off the polar bears.
Yeah. So I'm selling the PDF version on my website, trufkinathletics.com, and then the physical copy or the Kindle is available on Amazon.com. And it's a anti-factory farm shopping guide. I keep it to the point, even with the title, you know?
Yeah.
No storytelling, no bullshit, just like straight to the point of what's going on.
Yeah, that's well needed, I guess. And anywhere else that you want to, for someone watching or listening to find you, or is the Trufkin Athletics address the best way? Yeah, they can find me on trufkinathletics.com. I also use like Facebook. I think the name is like Evgeny Petrovich Trufkin. It's too long to spell, but if a person is interested, they'll find it some way. Yeah. And then sometimes I use Instagram as well. So. Yeah. Cool. Yeah. Cool. Any last words you want to bring in before we wrap this up? No, I mean, honestly, thanks for having me. Thanks for having me on the show. I appreciate your time and taking time to do that. So. Yeah. Thank you, Eugene, and thank you for the work you're doing and that you're putting out, and as a kind of counterweight to the huge agriculture business and putting light on stuff that most people don't know about that we need to illuminate.
Cool. Thanks for. Thank you.
Thanks.
Okay. Have a good night.
You too.